You're listening to the Atlanta Sports Podcasts, your weekly podcast for all things Atlanta sports. From the Atlanta Braves, Atlanta Falcons, and the Atlanta Hawks, to the Georgia Bulldogs and Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, we have you covered on the best podcast for Atlanta sports. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Atlanta Sports Podcasts. My name is Frankie Maloof, and I am not joined by Luke Winstel today. Unfortunately, he could not be with us. We're going to do our Georgia Bulldogs episode right now, as I'm sure you saw in the title. And if you don't know already, we are splitting up all of our episodes, so every team will get their own episode every week. Now, we may not release an episode for every team every week, but that is obviously the ultimate goal, but we're going to try to at least do the teams that are in season. So today we're going to start off with Georgia. They did beat Kentucky 27-24 on a last-second field goal by Rodrigo Blankenship. So a few things we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about the rushing game. Has it returned? And also we're going to talk about Jacob Eason again showing poise well beyond his years. And then we're going to also talk about the special teams, which has been much improved this week than it has been in previous weeks this season. So we're going to start off with the rushing game. Has it returned? Now, that is the ultimate question for most dog fans right now, because the rushing game has been a point of trouble recently, which is something you would not expect to see from a Georgia Bulldogs football team, especially since they have a traditional history of being able to run the football very well. And this year they have two of the best running backs in the country, and I still do believe that Georgia does have two of the best running backs in the entire nation, yet they haven't been able to run the ball very effectively at all. They've been a pass-first team for most of the season, when traditionally they are a run-first team. So this week, Nick Chubb and Sony Michel were reported to have a meeting with offensive coordinator Jim Chaney about getting them the ball more. And, that's something that you can't run the ball very well unless you don't hand the ball off to your running backs. And Georgia doesn't seem to have stuck with the run very well. They've tried it at first and it hasn't worked, and they haven't stayed with it. They've reverted back to the passing game quickly in games rather than pounding the rock. So something that Georgia was hoping to have worked on this week is getting the running game going, and I think they did a good job of it. And here's the stat line. So Sony Michel was the leading rusher, 19 carries, 127 yards, and a touchdown. Nick Chubb also added 21 carries for 85 yards, and then Brian Herrien had 1 carry for 2 yards. So, 215 rushing yards total as a team. That's something much better than what they have been doing in recent games. And, it's good to see them running the ball 42 times. Now, I don't know exactly how many times they've been running the ball, but I can tell you it hasn't been 42. Being able to run the ball effectively set themselves up to be able to throw the ball effectively as well. Jacob Eason, 17 for 31 passing, 245 yards through the air, and a touchdown. So we're going to move on to that. He again showed poise well beyond his years. As I said earlier, I was very impressed with Jacob Eason leading the team down the field once again to take a game-winning field goal attempt, which did end up going through. But, being able to manage the offense, I think he's been doing a much better job at that. He's learning still. But, earlier in the year, Kirby Smart was saying that he's got all the talent. His problem has been that he isn't able to manage the offense in the huddle as well. But I think he's done a good job now. He's able to, call the plays, manage the guys, move people around when he needs to. And I think that that's been good for Georgia. I mean, he is the quarterback of the future, and he's proved that he can be the quarterback of the future at this point. And, he's got the arm strength. He's got the intangibles now. So I think it's good for him to finally be, getting everything under control. There's still a few rookie mistakes, and he made some versus Florida as well. You might remember he ran the ball and then slid a little bit early, short of the first down, when you just need to put your head down and go for it. But, he'll be there eventually, and I'm excited for what the future holds for Georgia. Now, the special teams, their kicker, finally, I have confidence in the kicker, Rodrigo Blankenship. He won my confidence not just because of that last-second game-winning field goal. He's made several field goals now. He is 9 for 10 on the season. He was 4 for 4 versus Kentucky. He made 4 field goals, 2 of which were over 40 yards, which is very impressive. And so, he definitely has the potential now to turn into maybe a good, solid kicker. You might remember Georgia's had Blair Walsh and Marshall Morgan. And remember, Marshall Morgan had a rough first year, and then he turned into be a great kicker. We've had some struggles this year kicking the ball, but I think now we've got those figured out. We have a kicker. And then kick returner, Isaiah McKenzie. Now, one thing that Georgia fans are a little bit frustrated with is he's a little risky when he catches the ball. Now, I know he's the human joystick. That's his nickname, but you can't sit there and catch the ball only to get hammered and then fumble like he did versus Kentucky. I do think that I would love to get the ball in his hands more, and I know he's trying to make something out of it here, but, you know, there's got to be a point where you got to say, okay, we're just going to take what we have, and we're not going to try to make too much out of it like he did versus Kentucky on Saturday. So, you know, I'd love to get the ball in his hands, and I think we still need to keep him on the return team. There's no question about that. But I do think that maybe he needs to watch the film and look and say, okay, you know, here's, at this point, I should have had a fair catch and given us the ball right there rather than giving the ball back to Kentucky after our defense just made a good stop. And then our punters, you know, that was also an issue this year. But Marshall Long also rebounded. He's the freshman punter. He had 5 punts. He averaged 41.2 yards, which is not terrible. Now, you'd like to see that number go up, but again, he's just a freshman, so that number will go up as he gets older. But for the moment, 41 yards is not bad. Like I said, you want the number to get a little higher, but it's not terrible. And Kirby Smart must have liked his punting well enough not to substitute him out for Bryce Ramsey like he did versus Florida, where he kept switching punters because neither one could get it right. But I think that our special teams overall did a much better job this week than it did last week and in the weeks before. So I think that the issues aren't over. They're still there, but it's definitely shown some improvement, which we'd love to see going forward. And then defensively, just real quickly, Julian Rochester and Reggie Carter were they're tied for the leading tackler. Each had 8 tackles, and Julian Rochester had a sack along with David Marshall. And we're going to look ahead now. So Georgia plays Auburn this weekend. It's in Athens. It's at home. I think it's at 3:30. So that'll be a good game. Georgia needs to win one more time to get bowl eligible. Now, taking a look at their schedule, they have Auburn and Louisiana Lafayette and Georgia Tech. All 3 games are at home. So you'd like to think that Georgia could win at least one of them. Now, they should beat Louisiana Lafayette. I'm not sure if we'll be favored. I don't think we'll be favored against Auburn. I'm not sure where the line is right now. And I don't think Georgia Tech will be favored over Georgia, but we'll have to see how that goes. Because remember, Georgia Tech beat Vanderbilt 38-7, and that same Vanderbilt team turned around and beat Georgia 17-16 in Athens. So we'll have to see how that one goes as we get closer to that game, because you also have to remember that Georgia beat North Carolina game 1, and North Carolina just beat Georgia Tech. So I think it'll be an even game with Georgia Tech. We should beat Louisiana Lafayette, and Auburn will be favored over Georgia. I do think that Georgia can beat Auburn. I definitely think they can beat anybody on their schedule at this point, the last 3 teams. But remember, they do need the one more win to get bowl eligible. I think they'll get it, but at this point, there's not much they can do to change their bowl status. They're looking at maybe Shreveport or Nashville or maybe Birmingham at the worst case scenario for their bowl destinations, should they get bowl eligible. So thank you for listening to the Atlanta Sports Podcasts. I just want to remind you that each team will have their own episode from now on. That's the ultimate goal. And I'd also want to ask you if you would not mind, telling your friends, if you know somebody who's a Georgia fan, tell them to come listen to this show and future episodes about Georgia. If you know a Falcons fan or a Hawks fan, tell them to come listen to our Falcons episodes. That would be great. We really appreciate that. And also leave us a review in iTunes. Tell us how we're doing there. You can also contact us under the Contact Us tab on our website, atlantasportspodcasts.com. And you can also follow us on Twitter at ATL Sportscasts. Thank you again for listening, and we hope to see you next week with another show.